Park Gina stood before the Galactic Council and felt the weight of 1 billion dead pressing against her chest. The chamber was vast, built to hold representatives from 47 species, and every seat was filled. Light from distant stars filtered through the crystal dome above, casting long shadows across the floor. She had stood here many times before. She had smiled. She had negotiated. She had compromised. Today would be different. "Counselors," she began, her voice steady, "I bring evidence of crimes against humanity. The Meridian Collective has been conducting illegal biological experiments on human colonists in the Outer Reach systems. 12 colonies. 400,000 dead. 200,000 still missing." She pressed a button on her console. Images filled the air above the council floor. Bodies in tanks. Children strapped to machines. Medical reports written in cold. Clinical language describing how human organs responded to various toxins. The chamber was silent. Gina looked at Counselor Veth, the Meridian representative. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and eyes like black stones. He did not look away from the images. He did not look ashamed. He looked bored. "These experiments," Gina continued, "violate 17 articles of the Galactic Compact. We demand immediate access to all Meridian research facilities. We demand the return of our missing citizens. We demand justice." She stopped speaking. The silence stretched on. Finally, High Speaker Oren rose from her seat at the center of the chamber. She was ancient, her species one of the founding members of the council. Her voice was soft but carried to every corner of the room. "Ambassador Park," she said, "the council has reviewed your evidence. We find it ... inconclusive." Gina felt her hands curl into fists at her sides. "Inconclusive? You have images? You have medical records? You have testimony from survivors, all of which could be fabricated," Counselor Veth said smoothly. "Humans are known for their emotional nature. Perhaps you have misunderstood what you saw? Misunderstood?" Gina's voice rose before she could stop it. "Children were cut open while they were still alive. How do I misunderstand that?" High Speaker Oren raised a hand. "Ambassador, please. We understand your distress. But the Council cannot act on emotion. We must consider the stability of the galaxy. The Meridian Collective is a valued member of this body. Accusations of this magnitude require absolute proof. I have given you proof. You have given us claims." Oren's voice remained gentle, but there was steel beneath it. "The Council suggests that humanity accept these losses as the cost of galactic integration. All species have made sacrifices to maintain peace." Gina stared at her. She looked around the chamber at the other representatives. The Valenthi, who had traded with humans for a century. The Korath, who had studied in human universities. The Thesari, whose children had been saved by human doctors. All of them sat in silence. All of them looked away. She understood then. They were afraid. The Meridians had the largest fleet in the galaxy. The Meridians had weapons that could crack planets. And humans? Humans built hospitals. Humans taught in schools. Humans wrote poetry and made music and never, ever showed their teeth. The galaxy thought humans were soft. The galaxy thought humans were weak. Gina took a slow breath. She thought of her grandmother, who had survived the unification wars on Earth. She thought of her father, who had helped build the first human colony ships. She thought of Admiral Lee Taiwu, waiting aboard the horizon's edge with a message she had hoped she would never have to send. She reached up and removed the ambassador's seal from her collar. The metal was warm from her skin. She had worn it for 15 years. She placed it on the table in front of her. 200 years ago, she said quietly, humanity came to this council. We came in peace. We came with open hands and hopeful hearts. We asked to join your union. We promised to follow your rules. We promised to trust the process. She looked at Oren. We trusted you. Ambassador, I am no longer an ambassador. Gina's voice was calm now, calm and cold. Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council. Effective immediately. The chamber erupted. Representatives leaped to their feet. Voices overlapped in a dozen languages. Someone was shouting that this was impossible. Someone else was demanding to know if this was a negotiating tactic. It was not. Gina walked toward the exit. The crowd parted before her. She heard Counselor Veth laughing behind her, a sound like breaking glass. "Let them go," he said. "What will they do without us?" "They need our protection. They need our trade. They will come crawling back within a month." Gina did not turn around. She walked through the great doors of the council chamber and into the corridor beyond. Her aide, a young man named Osunwu, was waiting for her. His face was pale. "Ma'am," he said, "are we really doing this?" "We are, but the consequences, I know the consequences." She stopped walking and looked at him. "Do you know why humans have never fought a war against another species?" Sunwu shook his head. "Because we hoped we would never have to. Because we believed in diplomacy. Because we thought that if we were kind enough, patient enough, good enough, the galaxy would treat us with the same respect." She started walking again. "We were wrong." They reached the docking bay where her ship waited. As she stepped aboard, she pulled out her communicator and typed a single message to Admiral Lee Taiwu. "Light the beacon." She sent it. Somewhere, in deep space, aboard the horizon's edge, Taiwu received the message. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and scars on his hands from battles fought long ago. He had hoped this day would never come. He had trained for it anyway. He opened a channel to every human ship in the galaxy. There were thousands of them. Cargo vessels, research stations, colony ships, military cruisers. All of them received the same signal beacon that had not been lit since the Unification Wars. When humanity had nearly destroyed itself before finally coming together, the beacon meant one thing. The talking was over across the galaxy. Human ships began powering up their engines. Human workers began packing their belongings. Human soldiers began checking their weapons. And in the council chamber, High Speaker Oren felt a chill run down her spine. She had lived for 300 years. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had never seen a species voluntarily leave the council. She realized, too late, that she had made a terrible mistake. "What have we done?" she whispered. Counselor Veth was still laughing. He would not be laughing for long. The galaxy expected fire. They expected human warships pouring across borders, burning cities, taking revenge. They activated their defense grids. They mobilized their fleets. They prepared for war, but war did not come. Instead, the humans simply left. Captain Choi Yuna stood on the bridge of her cargo ship, the Morning Star, and watched her crew work. They were efficient and quiet. No one spoke unless they needed to. The mood was heavy, like the air before a storm. "Captain," her navigator said, "we've received 16 requests from the Sari stations asking us to continue our delivery routes. They're offering triple pay. Decline them." "Ma'am, that's a lot of money," I said. "Decline them." Yuna's voice was hard. "Set course for human space. We're going home." The Morning Star was one of 400 human cargo ships that carried medical supplies across the galaxy. Human-made medicine. Human-designed treatments. For 2 centuries, humans had shared their knowledge freely, asking only for fair trade in return. The Thesari needed human drugs to treat a blood disease that affected half their population. The Valanthi needed human compounds to purify their water. The Korath needed human enzymes to grow their food. Now those ships were turning around. On the research station Prometheus, Chief Engineer Kim Dongwoo stood in a laboratory that had been his home for 20 years. The walls were covered with awards and certificates. His team had won the Galactic Prize for Science 3 times. They had cured diseases. They had solved problems that had plagued other species for centuries. Now they were packing everything into crates. "Sir," one of his assistants said, "the Valanthi ambassador is requesting a meeting. He wants to discuss continuing our research partnership." "Tell him the partnership is over." "But our work on the Ventorian plague is ours." Dongwoo turned to face her. His eyes were tired. "We created that cure. We shared it freely. And when the Meridians took our people, the Volanthi said nothing. The Chorus said nothing. Everyone said nothing. He turned back to his work. So now they get nothing? Across the galaxy, the same scene repeated itself. Human teachers left their schools. Human doctors left their hospitals. Human engineers left their factories. They did not argue. They did not explain. They simply packed their things and went home. Governor Baek Soo-jin stood on the balcony of her office on Kepler 7 and watched the evacuation ships rise into the sky. 12 billion humans lived on integrated colonies throughout the galaxy. All of them were leaving. Her aide approached her. Governor, we've had 300 requests from local governments asking us to reconsider. They're saying their economies will collapse. They should have thought of that before. Some of them are threatening to block our evacuation ships. Soo-jin turned to look at him. Her face was calm, but her eyes were dangerous. Let them try. No one tried. The truth was beginning to sink in. For 200 years, humans had made themselves useful. They had filled gaps that other species did not even know existed. They had solved problems quietly, efficiently, without asking for praise. The galaxy had grown dependent on them without realizing it. Now the galaxy was learning what life looked like without humans on the Volanthi homeworld. Water purification plants began to fail. Engineers scrambled to understand human technology that they had never bothered to learn. On Chorus stations, food production dropped by 30% in the first week. On the Sari colonies, hospitals ran out of medicine, and people began to die. And still the humans did not return. Admiral Lee Taiwu sat in his command chair aboard the Horizon's Edge and read the messages that flooded in from across the galaxy. Governments begging, corporations offering money, individual citizens pleading for help. Surely we can negotiate, one message said. Name your price, said another. Please, said a third. Our children are sick. Taiwu felt the weight of those words. He was not a cruel man. He had spent his life protecting people, not hurting them. But he thought of the human children who had died in Meridian laboratories. He thought of the parents who would never see their sons and daughters again. He thought of Part Gina standing alone in the council chamber while 46 species looked away. He typed the same response to every message. You had your chance at the table. You chose silence. In the halls of the Galactic Council, panic was setting in. High Speaker Oren called emergency meetings. She proposed new resolutions. She made speeches about unity and cooperation. No one listened. The other species were too busy trying to save themselves. Councillor Veth remained confident. They will come back, he said at every meeting. They are weak. They need us more than we need them. But days passed and the humans did not come back. Then the Meridian War Fleet mobilized, 300 ships, dreadnoughts and cruisers and fighters, the largest military force in the galaxy. They moved toward the human border, slowly, deliberately, making sure everyone could see. The message was clear. If humans would not return peacefully, they would be forced to return. Veth smiled when he heard the news. Now they will understand, he said. Now they will learn their place. On the Horizon's Edge, Taiwu received the report of the approaching fleet. He stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. Sir, his communications officer said, should we send a warning? Ask for negotiations? No, sir. Taiwu turned to face his crew. These were good people. Soldiers and officers who had served humanity for decades. They had families. They had hopes. They did not want war, neither did he, but some things were worth fighting for. Signal all ships, he said. Form up at defensive line Sigma and activate the Prometheus protocols. His weapons officer looked up sharply. Sir, those weapons have never been tested in combat. I know. We built them hoping we would never need them. I know. Taiwu sat back down in his command chair. But we need them now. The human fleet moved into position. 200 ships against 300. They were outnumbered, outgunned, facing an enemy that had conquered dozens of species, But as the Meridian commanders studied their sensor readings, they began to notice something strange. The human ships were not in a defensive formation. They were not preparing to retreat. They were not positioning themselves to negotiate. They were in an attack formation, and they were smiling. For the first time, Counselor Veth felt a flicker of doubt. What did the humans know that he did not? He was about to find out. War Marshal Torek stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Infinite Wrath, and looked at the human fleet with contempt. 200 ships. Small ships. Weak ships. Ships built by a species that had spent 2 centuries building schools instead of weapons. This would be easy. All ships, he commanded, advance. Standard conquest formation. We will break them in the first wave. 300 Meridian warships surged forward. They had conquered the Korath in 6 days. They had crushed the Valanthi in 3. The humans would fall even faster. On the horizon's edge, Admiral Li Taiwu watched the enemy approach. His face was calm. His hands were steady. He had been a soldier for 40 years. He had fought pirates and rebels and criminals. But he had never fought a war like this. Sir, his tactical officer said, they're in range. Hold, sir, they're targeting us. Hold. The Meridian fleet opened fire. Energy beams and missiles streaked across space, slamming into human shields. The horizon's edge shook. Warning lights flashed. But Taiwu did not move. Now they think we're weak, he said quietly. Now they think we're afraid. He stood. All ships execute pattern Omega. Show them what humans can do. The human fleet exploded into motion. Squadron leader Han Myra pushed her fighter to speeds that should have been impossible. The G-forces pressed against her body like a giant hand, crushing her into her seat. Any other species would have blacked out. Any other species would have died. Humans were not any other species. Ghost Squadron, she called to her pilots, follow my lead. Hit them fast and hit them hard. Her fighters dove into the Meridian formation like wolves into a flock of sheep. They were smaller than Meridian fighters, faster, more agile. They twisted through spaces that should have been too tight. They turned at angles that should have been impossible. And they fired weapons that tore through Meridian armor like paper. War Marshal Torek watched in disbelief as his fighter screen dissolved. What are they doing? How are they moving like that? His tactical officer's voice was shaking. Sir, their pilots are pulling maneuvers at 15-20 Gs. No species can survive that. Then how? Humans can. The officer looked up at him with fear in his eyes. Humans can survive almost anything. On the horizon's edge, Taiwu gave his next order. Launch the kinetic bombardment systems. Deep in the ship, massive railguns powered up. They were simple weapons, in a way. No energy beams, no fancy technology. Just chunks of metal, accelerated to a fraction of the speed of light. Simple and devastating. The first volley hit a Meridian dreadnought dead center. The ship did not explode. It crumpled, folding in on itself like a crushed can. The second volley hit 2 more ships. Then 3. Then 5. War Marshal Torek stared at his display as red light spread across his fleet. This is impossible. Where did they get these weapons? He did not understand. For 200 years, humans had shared their technology freely. Medicine, agriculture, engineering. They had given the galaxy everything except their weapons, while other species watched humans build hospitals. They did not notice humans also building guns. While other species laughed at human kindness, they did not notice humans also training for war. The humans had hoped they would never need these weapons. They had hoped the galaxy would treat them fairly. The galaxy had not. Now the galaxy was paying the price. On the Meridian command station, far from the battle, Counselor Veth watched the destruction unfold. His hands gripped the edge of his console until his knuckles turned white. Send reinforcements, he ordered. We have no reinforcements, his aide said. That was our entire border fleet. Then call for help from the Council. The Council is not responding. Veth stared at the screen. 70% of his fleet was gone. 70% in less than 6 hours. Against an enemy that was supposed to be weak? Against an enemy that was supposed to be soft, he understood now. He understood what humanity had hidden behind their smiles and their kindness. He understood the truth that the galaxy had been too blind to see. Humans were not weak. They had never been weak. They had been patient. And now they were angry. On the horizon's edge, Taiwu watched the surviving Meridian ships begin to retreat. His communications officer turned to him. "Sir, should we pursue?" "No." Taiwu's voice was heavy. He was not happy. He had never wanted this. "We came to defend ourselves, not to conquer." "Let them go. Sir, if we let them rebuild, they won't." Taiwu sat down in his chair. He suddenly felt very old. They'll remember this day forever. They'll tell their children and their children's children about the day they attacked humanity and lost. He looked at the burning wreckage on his display. That's enough. Hanmyra and her surviving pilots returned to the horizon's edge. They were exhausted, bruised, pushed to their physical limits. But they had one dot as Mira climbed out of her fighter. A young pilot approached her. His hands were shaking. "Ma'am, I've never seen anything like that. I didn't know we could do that." Myra looked at him. She thought of her grandmother, who had told her stories about the unification wars. She thought of all the humans who had fought and died so that their children could live in peace. "We have always been able to do that," she said. "We just hoped we would never have to." Taiwu opened a channel that broadcast to every ship in the galaxy, human and alien alike. "The Meridian Collective attacked humanity without provocation," he said. "We defended ourselves. Any other species wishing to test humanity's resolve is welcome to try." He closed the channel across the galaxy. Governments listened to the message and felt fear unlike anything they had known before. The Meridians had been the most powerful military force in known space. Now they were broken. What did that make humans? In the council chamber, High Speaker Oren sat alone. The other representatives had fled, rushing back to their homeworlds to build defenses that they now knew would be useless. She thought about Park Gina standing before the council, asking for justice. She thought about the silence that had followed. She thought about Councillor Veth laughing as Gina walked away. "We were fools," she whispered to the empty chamber. "We were all fools." And somewhere in deep space, the human fleet held its position at the border. They did not advance. They did not attack. They simply waited, watching the galaxy had taught humanity a lesson about. Trust. Now humanity was teaching the galaxy a lesson about consequences. And the lesson was not over yet. 3 months after the battle, the galaxy was dying, not from war, not from weapons. The humans had not fired a single shot since the Meridian defeat. They did not need to. Their absence was weapon enough. On the Valanthi homeworld, cities went dark. Power plants failed because no one knew how to maintain the human-designed reactors. Water became poison because the purification systems broke down. People gathered in the streets, looking up at the sky, waiting for human ships that did not come. On Korath stations, food riots broke out. The farms that fed billions depended on human enzymes and human technology. Without them, crops withered and died. Children went hungry. Old people starved. On the Sari colonies, hospitals became morgues. The blood disease that human medicine had controlled for a century came roaring back. Doctors worked until they collapsed, but there was nothing they could do. The medicine was gone, and still the humans did not return. Historian Yoon Sung-ho sat in his office on Earth and documented what the galaxy was calling the silence. He collected reports from every species, every world, every station. He read about the suffering. He read about the deaths. He read about governments begging for help that never came. It broke his heart. He was an old man. He had spent his life studying the history of humanity's relationship with the galaxy. He had written books about cooperation and hope and the dream of a united civilization. Now he was writing about collapse. "We did not cause this," he wrote in his journal. "We did not want this. But we cannot save people who would not save us. We cannot trust people who would not stand for us when we needed them." He put down his pen. "This is not revenge. This is consequence. On Lesser 4, Dr. Kang Jie worked in a hospital that was falling apart. She was one of the few humans who had stayed behind when the evacuation came. She could not leave her patients. She could not abandon the people who depended on her, but every day, it got harder. The local government sent representatives to her constantly. They begged her to contact Earth. They offered her money, power, anything she wanted. They promised that things would be different, that the Sari would speak up for humanity if only the humans would come back. She always refused. You should have spoken up before, she told them. You should have stood with us when the council betrayed us. You should have demanded justice when the Meridians took our people. She looked at them with tired eyes. Words are easy. Actions are hard. And you chose the easy path. She went back to her patients. There was nothing more to say. In the Galactic Council chamber, High Speaker Orin convened emergency session after emergency session. She proposed everything that Ambassador Park Gina had originally requested. Investigations into the Meridian experiments. Trials for those responsible. Reparations for the human victims. Every proposal passed unanimously. It did not matter. The human government did not respond to any of it. Orin sent personal messages to Park Gina, who was now Secretary of Interstellar Affairs in the Earth government. She apologized. She admitted fault. She begged for a second chance. Gina did not reply. Orin called for sanctions against the Meridian Collective. The council agreed. Meridian trade routes were closed. Meridian diplomats were expelled. Councillor Veth was stripped of his position and arrested. Still, the humans did not respond. The smaller species began to panic. They had done nothing wrong, they said. They had not experimented on humans. They had not voted against human requests. They should not be punished for the crimes of the Meridians. They sent their own messages to Earth. They offered alliances. They offered loyalty. They offered everything they had. Some were accepted. The Thesari, who had sheltered human refugees during the evacuation, received a small shipment of medicine. The Vilanthi, who had publicly condemned the council's decision, received a team of engineers to help repair their power plants, but most species received nothing. We cannot trust everyone who says they are sorry, Gina explained to her staff. Words are easy. We will watch their actions. We will see who truly stands with us, and then we will decide. Across the galaxy, governments realized that they were being tested. Every decision they made, every action they took was being recorded and judged. Humanity was no longer the forgiving friend who would help anyone who asked. Humanity was watching. And humanity was taking notes. On the Meridian homeworld, chaos reigned. Their fleet was destroyed. Their economy was collapsing. Their allies had abandoned them. People filled the streets, demanding to know why their leaders had started a war they could not win. Counselor Veth was dragged from his home and thrown in prison. He sat in his cell and could not understand what had gone wrong. Humans were weak. Humans were soft. Everyone knew that. How had they been so wrong? A guard came to his cell one day and told him that he would be handed over to the humans for trial. He would face justice for the experiments, for the 400,000 dead, for the 200,000 missing. For the first time in his life, Veth felt fear. What will they do to me? He asked. The guard looked at him with disgust. Whatever they want. On Earth, Gina received word that the council was ready to meet her terms. Full accountability. Complete restructuring. A new system where humanity would be an equal partner, not a servant begging for scraps. Her aide, Oh Sunwoo, brought her the news. He was young and hopeful, and he could not hide his excitement. Ma'am, this is what we wanted. They're giving us everything. Gina looked at the report. She thought about the years she had spent in the council chamber, smiling and negotiating and believing that if she just worked hard enough, the galaxy would treat humanity fairly. She thought about the day she had placed her ambassador's seal on the table and walked away. She thought about the 400,000 dead who would never come home. No, she said quietly. This is not what we wanted. We wanted them to do the right thing because it was right. We wanted them to stand with us because we were their partners. We wanted them to see us as equals, not as servants to be discarded when we were no longer convenient. She put down the report. They are only giving us this because they are afraid. Because they are desperate. Because they have no other choice. Sunwoo's excitement faded. Then what do we do? Gina stood and walked to the window. Earth spread out below her, blue and green and beautiful. Humanity's home. The place they had left to explore the stars and join a community they thought would welcome them. We go back to the council, she said. We tell them our terms. And we make very clear that this is their last chance. She turned to face him. If they fail us again, we will never return. Sunwoo nodded slowly. He understood. The galaxy had one more opportunity to prove itself. Gina hoped they would take it, but she was no longer sure they deserved it. Park. Gina walked into the Galactic Council chamber for the last time. 6 months had passed since she had placed her ambassador's seal on the table and left. 6 months of silence. 6 months of suffering. 6 months that had changed everything. The chamber was full. Every seat was taken. Representatives from 46 species watched her enter. They did not whisper among themselves. They did not look at their devices. They simply stared at her with fear in their eyes. Behind her walked Admiral Lee Taiwu in his military uniform. His presence was a message. Humanity came with words, but they also came with strength. They would not be ignored again. High Speaker Oren rose from her seat. She looked older than she had 6 months ago, tired, defeated, the weight of her failure pressed down on her shoulders. Secretary Park, she said, the Galactic Council welcomes you. We are prepared to hear humanity's terms. Gina stepped to the center of the chamber. She did not smile. She did not offer pleasantries. Those days were over. 6 months ago, she began, I stood in this chamber and asked for justice. I presented evidence of crimes against my people. I asked you to hold the Meridian Collective accountable. She looked around the room. You refused. You told me to accept the deaths of 400,000 humans as the cost of galactic integration. You told me that stability was more important than lives. No one spoke. No one moved. I will not stand here and tell you about the suffering that followed our withdrawal, Gina continued. You know what happened. You lived through it. Your people died because you had become dependent on us and never realized it. Your economies collapsed because you took us for granted. Her voice hardened. That is not our fault. That is the consequence of your choices. She pulled out a document and placed it on the speaker's podium. These are humanity's terms for returning to galactic affairs. They are not negotiable. You will accept them completely or we will leave and never return, she began to read. First, full accountability for the Meridian atrocities. Every person involved in the experiments will be tried under human law. Counselor Veth will be handed over to human authorities immediately. Oren nodded. Agreed. Second, complete dissolution of the current council structure. This body allowed powerful species to escape consequences because everyone was too afraid to challenge them. That system is finished. A new galactic compact will be created with equal representation and equal accountability for all members. Some representatives shifted uncomfortably. This would reduce their power. This would change everything, agreed, Oren said quietly. Third, humanity will participate in this new compact as an equal partner, not a subordinate. We will share our technology, our knowledge, our resources, but only with species that have proven they deserve our partnership. We will not give blindly anymore. We will not trust blindly anymore. Trust must be earned. Oren closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were wet. Agreed. Gina put down the document. There is one more thing. This is not a term. It is a warning. She looked at every representative in turn. We are not returning to save you. We are offering you a chance to build something better. If you waste that chance, if you betray us again, if you allow another species to suffer the way we suffered, we will not give you another opportunity. We will leave and we will never come back. And you will learn what it means to live in a galaxy without humanity. The chamber was absolutely silent. Gina stepped back from the podium. Those are our terms. You have 1 hour to vote. She turned and walked to the side of the chamber where Taiwu waited. He looked at her with respect. You did well, he said quietly. I hope it's enough. It's more than they deserve. Gina nodded. She knew that. But she also knew that humanity could not isolate itself forever. The galaxy was too big. There were too many problems that required cooperation. If there was a chance to build something better, they had to try, even if it meant trusting people who had failed them before. The vote took 15 minutes. It was unanimous. Every species accepted humanity's terms. Counselor Veth was brought from his cell and handed over to human security officers. He looked smaller than Gina remembered, weaker. He did not meet her eyes as they took him away. Hi, Speaker. Orin approached Gina after the vote. Her hands were trembling. Secretary Park, she said, I know words cannot undo what was done. But I want you to know that I am sorry. I was a coward. I let fear guide my decisions, and innocent people paid the price. She bowed her head. I will spend whatever time I have left trying to make things right. Gina looked at her for a long moment. She wanted to be angry. Part of her was still angry. But she also saw an old woman who had made a terrible mistake and would have to live with it forever. Then make things right, Gina said. That's all we ask. She turned and walked away. Outside the chamber, her aide, Sunwoo, was waiting. He would be humanity's liaison to the new compact. He would represent the next generation, the young people who would build whatever came next. Ma'am, he said, do you think this will work? Do you think they'll really change? Gina thought about the question. She thought about the 200 years humanity had spent trying to be part of the galactic community. She thought about the kindness they had shown and the betrayal they had received. Maybe, she said. Maybe not. But we have to try. She looked at him. Just remember, we are not who we were before. We will never be that trusting again. We will never be that naive. If they fail us, we walk away. No second chances. No forgiveness. Sunwoo nodded. He understood. They walked to the docking bay where their ship waited. Taiwu joined them. The three of them stood at the viewport and looked out at the stars. What happens now? Taiwu asked. We rebuild, Gina said. We make new alliances with species that prove their worth. We watch the others and see if they've really changed. And we never forget what happened here. And if they haven't changed? Gina's face was hard. Then they'll learn the same lesson the Meridians learned. Humanity is not weak. We are not soft. We choose to be kind because we believe in something better. But if that kindness is mistaken for weakness, if it is used against us, we will show the galaxy exactly what we're capable of. She turned away from the viewport. And they will not enjoy the lesson. They boarded their ship and departed. Across the galaxy the news spread. Humanity had returned. The old council was dead. A new era was beginning. Some species celebrated. They had survived. They had been given another chance. Others were quiet. They remembered the human fleet at the Meridian border. They remembered the weapons that had torn through dreadnoughts like paper. They remembered the cold message that Taiwu had broadcast to the galaxy. They knew they were being watched, and in the homes and schools and gathering places of 100 worlds, a new saying began to spread. Parents told it to their children. Teachers told it to their students. Leaders told it to their people. Never make humanity abandon the table. Because when they stand up, they don't come back as friends. On Earth, life went on. Humans returned to their work, their families, their dreams. But something had changed. There was a hardness in them now, a wariness that had not been there before. They still believed in cooperation. They still believed in kindness. But they had learned that some people did not deserve those gifts, and they would never forget that lesson. The galaxy had taught humanity that trust could be betrayed. Humanity had taught the galaxy that kindness was not. Weakness. Both lessons would echo through the stars for generations to come, and somewhere in the quiet places between worlds, The children of both humans and aliens would grow up in a galaxy that was a little bit wiser, a little bit more careful, and a lot more respectful of the species that had once been dismissed as soft because they had learned the truth. Humanity was never soft. They were just patient, and patience, in the end, was the most dangerous weapon of all.